Most poker players think that whenever they get a strong value hand, like our pocket kings here, that playing it is easy. You just bet the flop, bet the turn, load the money in, and hope you don't lose. Other players think they only need to be betting when they are very sure they have the best hand. And it turns out both those strategies are wrong. And in today's video, we are going to be discussing the best value betting strategy based in good, fundamentally sound game theory optimal principles. Because in reality, if you do not maximize value with your best hands, you're going to have a hard time winning big pots, because most of your big pots are going to come from your big hands. So let's take a look at these pocket kings. 50 big blinds deep in the hijack seat, we raise it up, and the big blind calls. The flop comes 10, 7, 4, 2 clubs, and the big blind checks. Take a second, think about what you would do in this scenario, because a lot of people mess this spot up on the flop. You may say, how hard could it be? You should bet. Well, the question becomes, how much should you bet? As a general default rule, when there are 2 to a flush or 2 to a straight on the flop, but not 3 to a flush and not 3 to a straight, and when the board is not paired, when you bet, you're going to want to bet using a large-ish size. And in this particular scenario, you're actually going to want to bet every single time, or almost every single time, because we have all the overpairs in our range. We have lots of high equity draws, but also very importantly, we have a lot of top pairs. We would raise ace 10, king 10, queen 10, perhaps even jack 10 in this spot. So we have lots of strong hands that can happily put the money in. So when the opponent checks, we're going to bet. And because the board is dynamic, 2 to a straight and or 2 to a flush, in this case both, we're going to want to bet using a large size, something like 2/3 pot, 3/4 pot, perhaps even pot as you get deeper and deeper and deeper. So in this scenario, we do go for the 2/3 pot size bet. We can pull up PeakGTO.com to confirm this is true. We raise the hijack seat. The big blind calls. The flop comes 10, 7, 4. The opponent checks. In this scenario, you can actually see almost every single time we want to be betting using a large bet size, 2/3 pot. I bet if we gave the solver options to use bigger size in this scenario, it might even choose bigger, especially with our hand like pocket kings. That's almost always good but vulnerable. Notice the 25% pot bet is never used. If you were in this situation, you said continuation bet small every time. You got the every time part right, but you got the size wrong. And this scenario, horribly wrong, because you want to bet big with your entire range. The opponent calls. Turn is the 2 of diamonds, and the opponent checks. Pot is 14 big blinds. We have 44 behind. Take a second and consider what you would do in this situation, because a lot of people, again, mess it up. While you're thinking about it, write your answer in the comment section below. We're going to make this a quiz video today. While you're down there, click the like button, click the notification button, click the subscribe button. Thanks for being here. This is a spot where you are definitely going to want to bet, and you're going to want to bet using a large size. And your size is going to be based on your stack depth compared to the size of the pot. You essentially want to make a bet now that will allow you to reasonably get all in by the river for roughly the same percentage pot. In this scenario, we go for roughly pot on the turn. And this is going to be based on, again, the fact that the board is very, very dynamic. If the board was less dynamic, meaning perhaps the 2 of spades came on the turn, meaning there's not 2 flush draws, perhaps then you could use a slightly smaller size. But generally, as the board has more straight draws and more flush draws, you're typically want to be betting bigger when you are value betting. But on the turn, you're not going to bet every single time. You're going to want to bet with a much more polarized range. We're going to take a look at that in Peak in just a second. Notice here, if we do pot it and the opponent calls, the pot's going to go to 40,000 or so. And we are going to have about 30,000 in our pot for a nice 75% pot size river shove, which is very reasonable. What a lot of people do wrong on the turn is they automatically bet half pot. Maybe you're playing online poker and they have a half pot button looking you right in the face and you click half pot. But as we're about to see, that is a very, very incorrect strategy. So let's take a look in Peak GTO. We bet 2/3 on the flop. The opponent called. Turn is the 2 of diamonds. And the opponent's going to check every time. And we now bet big. Notice we should be betting roughly the size of the pot in this situation, which is exactly what we did. Notice the smaller bet sizes of 60% pot and 24% pot, again, are never used. We do see a few over bets creeping in, but this is a spot where, for simplicity, I would pot it or I would check. And as another general rule, when you bet the flop with your entire range and get called, you cannot bet everything on the turn because your range now contains a whole lot of junk. Like, for example, king 6 of hearts, right? It's not a hand that wants to put money in the pot. Queen Jack of hearts doesn't really want to put money in the pot. Stuff like that. You have a lot of medium strength stuff. Notice King 9, Queen 9, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of these hands don't especially want to put money in the pot at this point because they're really, really bad. So that's going to result in us having to check. We also have a decent amount of medium strength hands like a 7 or pocket 9s or pocket 6s that also don't want to put money in the pot. What this results in is us betting with a lot of our very good made hands that are likely vulnerable to being outdrawn. Notice all the 10s and better are betting. Then we're betting with some draws, both high equity and low equity. Notice we have ace 5 of clubs and diamonds and king 5 of spades and hearts betting. This may seem a little bit counterintuitive. Why bet some flush draws and some non-flush draws? When you're in position, your draws need to be chosen from high equity draws that can bet and then call raises, like flush draws with straight draws, overcards, etc., but also with junk that cannot win at the showdown, but still has some outs, like king 5 in this instance. Notice that also results in us having some king high flushes in our range when it goes check, check on the turn. And also, if we do bet the turn and get called, we also have some flushes when we bet and get called because we have some ace high draws here. Notice if we have ace 5 of diamonds in this spot for a nut flush draw, gut shot, straight draw, and overcard, if we bet the turn and get shoved, we can easily call. With king 5, though, we don't really love betting and then calling off against the shove, which is why you see those checking a large chunk of the time. Interesting heuristic. This is about value betting, though. Top pair, good kicker, and better, and in this scenario, actually all top pairs, wants to get money in the pot, and you have to use a big bet size to do it. We bet big. Opponent calls. River's the 8 of spades. The opponent checks. We have 75% pot. Can we go for value? In my mind, the answer is definitively yes. If you do not go for value in this situation, you are leaving a ton of money on the table. But notice, this is a relatively scary river, right? The opponent could easily have 2 pair, but this is a spot where we have a very easy all-in with pretty much any 10 or better. Notice 10-9 is not quite good enough to get in there. Notice our 7s all check, right? And then we're using logical bluffs, which are going to be the junky draws we bet on the turn that did not get there. Notice king 9, queen 9, and king 5 of hearts and spades really, really, really love going all in this situation. Notice if we did have perhaps any ace 6, it goes for it. Any ace 5 goes for it. Any ace 3 is going for it. These are all hands that cannot really win at the showdown. And because we have so many logical value bets, really any decent 10 or better, we get to have a lot of bluffs in the spot. What a lot of people do very wrong, though, is they don't value bet the 10s. And they don't even value bet the kings. And instead, they just let it go check, check. They're like, oh, the pot's big. I'm happy with this. Let's just take the win. But that leaves a lot of money on the table. Notice if we do go all in, what should the opponent call with? The opponent should be calling off any 10. Notice they don't have a lot of 10s in their range. They should raise a lot of them on the flop. They should call off some 7s. Really, they have to call off with a whole lot of marginal stuff. And while we will be beat every once in a while, this is a spot where we have a very, very easy all in. We go all in, we get called, we win the pot, and that's nice. Let's take a look at another example. Here we have pocket kings again. We raise it up, same spot, big blind calls. Queen, 8, 6, opponent checks. Take a second, think about it. What size should you use on the queen, 8, 6? Let's go back over here to PeakGTO.com. We'll enter in the different flop. It is queen, 8, 6, opponent checks. This is, again, a spot where you're going to want to bet pretty often, mostly using the big size. Now, we do have to bet a little bit less often in the spot because the opponent's going to have just more middle connected cards, gut shot, straight draws, etc. in this situation. So while we do have a lot of queen X in our range, so does the opponent. So we don't get to bet every single time. We're checking 14% in game theory optimal world. In reality, I think it's fine just to bet this spot every time. Anytime the GTO frequency is to very frequently bet, like 80% of the time or more, assuming your opponent's not a good, strong, world-class player or someone who likes to check raise a ton, you can get away with betting very frequently. Notice the bigger bet size is used the majority of the time because, again, the board is very dynamic. With our pocket kings using the bigger bet size every time. Your hands that are almost always good but vulnerable, that's going to be good queens and better. In this scenario, aces, kings, ace, queen, king, queen, mostly choose the bigger bet size. We bet, opponent calls, turns the 4 diamonds, and the opponent checks. Okay, now there's 3 diamonds on the board. We do not have kings with a king of diamonds. And this is a spot that trips up a lot of people because you have to figure out, should you value bet or should you check? And I realize it may be tempting to bet in this scenario for value and protection, but I think we actually want to check it a large chunk of the time. Let's take a look. Say the turn is the 4 of diamonds. Notice this 4 is actually pretty good for the opponent's range. So if they have 7-5, 6-4, 8-4, etc., that all gets there, as well as the flushes. The opponent should actually lead this turn every once in a while, which is cool to see. But with our pocket kings now, we see that we are mixing if we do not have the diamond, right? With the king of diamonds, we're happy to bet because we can bet and easily call a raise. But with our particular kings, we are mixing checks and medium-sized bets. You guys hear the sirens going off? Sirens are going off. Don't go crazy. Don't lose all your chips in these spots a lot of the time. All right. This time we opt to let it go check, check. Let's consider which other hands are opting to bet in the spot. Notice king, queen with no diamond is checking the vast majority of the time. That's going to be the case for queen, jack as well, queen 10 as well. Notice when you have the diamond in the spot, you're far more inclined to continue betting because if you bet and you happen to be behind, you still have some outs to improve to a flush some chunk of the time. But I want to make it really clear here, even queens is not happy to go for value. And especially a hand like pocket jacks or 10s or 9s, those hands definitely do not bet, even if they have the diamond the vast majority of the time, because if you bet, not a whole lot of worse hands can call you. But if you let it go check, check, you can easily call if your opponent bets on the river. For example, as a sample line, say it goes check, check on the turn, river's 2 of spades, and the opponent then bets. Let's say they used a common size of 60% pot. You see now the 10s are mixing it, but at least you've induced some bluffs, and they do get to call when they have the diamond. If they use the small size on the river now, though, these hands are very, very happy and can all confidently call, right? If we instead bet the turn and get called or raise, though, then these hands are miserable, and they all have to fold. So by letting it go check, check, you get to see the showdown some chunk of the time. If we did have the jacks and we let it go check, check on the turn, and then your opponent checks on the river, you can then value bet if you have the 10 of diamonds, blocking some of your opponent's auto calls with the flushes, and you can check it back with your underpairs. So recognize when you have a medium-sized hand like pocket jacks in the spot, don't be afraid to keep the pot manageable. With our kings, though, on the turn, let's go back all the way to the turn, we have the option of betting or checking. This time we let it go check, check. All right. River is the 10 of spades, and now the opponent checks. Dicey spot. What do you think we should do? Can we value bet in this scenario? We have 44 big blinds. The pot is 14. River is the 10 of spades. A pretty rough river. The opponent's going to bet some chunk of the time on the river. When they check, though, kings is definitely going to value bet. When it goes check, check on the turn, and your opponent checks again on the river, top pair good kicker is pretty much always happy to continue betting. And in this situation, we see roughly queen 9-ish and better going for value. I see we have some weird checks here with the queen jack. King queen's mostly betting for value. Ace queen, kings, and aces are all thrilled to bet for value. Now the question becomes how much? And it looks like half pot is the size. Typically in scenarios like this, when most of your value betting range is, call it medium strength, in that scenario, you're going to want to bet using a medium-ish size. And as a general rule, when you lose to a lot of hands, like in this scenario, we are going to lose to a lot of hands. Our hands like pocket kings are going to want to go medium. Whereas in the previous scenario, on this board, we actually beat almost everything. I mean, I know we lose to a few sporadic hands, but when we pot the turn, we don't have to worry about the gut shots unless they were gut shots and flush draws. So we beat almost everything on the river. This scenario, that's not necessarily true. So in this spot, we do go 7,000. We're still happy to bet for value, though. I want to make it crystal clear we're happy to bet for value. And then the opponent goes all in. This is what everyone fears. Doom and gloom, the opponent rips it in, and now we have to figure out if we should call it off for all of our money. And I need you to take a second and think about what you would do. Because now, even though we can look at this in the GTO solver, where we bet in the spot, and the opponent then rips it all in on us, we're going to see that our pocket kings calls basically every time, even without a diamond. And you may say, ooh, but is that actually a good play? Because if you just straight look at a solver and do what the solver does every time against every player, you're going to be leaving money on the table. So the question becomes, what bluffs do we need the opponent to have to make this call good? Well, take a look at what I happen to randomly be hovering on top of right here. The pocket nines with the 9 of diamonds needs to bluff all in. And I think this is a spot where a lot of people in this situation are never bluffing all in with the pocket nines with the 9 of diamonds. Notice 10-9 with the 10 of diamonds is also bluffing all in. Most people don't do that either. Notice what else? Those are going to be our main bluffs. So we have to ask, is your opponent shoving those hands or are they not? Notice we have some random Jack 10 bluffing all in. I don't think anybody does that either. And then the question becomes, do they bluff all in with all these, or do they go all in with these value hands, which are flushes? Obviously, yes. We have some sporadic Jack, we have some sporadic 8, 7 of spades bluffing all in. I don't think anybody does that. But notice in the scenario, most of the all-ins that are very logical are, 2 pairs and better hands, which I think a lot of people will check shove with. And I think a lot of people are going to have a really hard time finding the bluffs. So this is a spot where even though the GTO solver says to bet and then call off against the shove with a hand like pocket kings, which to be fair isn't different against the GTO value shoving range, you should actually fold this very easily. It is okay to value bet because whenever you do value bet in the spot on the river, I just want to show that when you do value bet, look at all the hands the opponent should call with. Notice they should call queen 10, jack 10, ace 8, king 8, jack 8, right? A lot of hands that we are getting value from, and the fact that we bet these hands also allows us to bluff, which lets you get value out of those bluffs. So, definitely a cool scenario. What I want to do real quick before we pack it up today is I want to go through and actually train some of these spots to show you how you can use PeakGTO to further improve your skills. We're playing a tournament. We're going to start pre-flop, hijack versus the big blind. For our hands, let's just give us aces, kings, queens, and jacks, okay? I only want to be dealt these hands pre-flop because we want to train these normally very good hands. So let's just go right down here. We're going to raise it up from the hijack seat as we're going to play all these hands, of course. And in this scenario, we get 3-bet. What do we do here? Call, click it, jam. Looks like click it and call are fine. Let's raise our pocket jacks. Let's try to go to the flop. Looks like we are getting pushed off our screen down here. All right, flop comes ace, queen, 7. What should we do in this scenario? Check or bet? We should either bet small or check. I think either play is reasonable. Let's go for the small bet, although I'm sure check's going to be used with this particular hand a lot of the time because it is clearly not an awesome hand. Turn, we're going to let it go check, check every time. We have a very clear medium strength hand at this point. And if the opponent bets the river, we're probably just going to fold. They bet big on the river, easy fold. Now you may say, you lost the hand with jacks, that's bad. Sometimes we're going to lose hands. Get used to it. We raise here. Let's call in position with our pocket kings. In this scenario, it looks like we should be slow playing some chunk of the time with aces, kings, and queens. We actually go explore this over here in the library. Re-raise the hijack seat when the big blind 3-bets. Notice we actually don't do much 4-betting at all. We do a lot of calling with aces, kings, and queens in the spot. Jacks does opt to just rip it in, though. All right, flop comes jack, jack 10. They bet. Ugh, nasty spot. I suppose we're supposed to call. We do call 92% of the time and jam every once in a while. They check the turn. Can we check or bet small? What do you think? I think we can go either way this time. Let's go check to induce bluffs, but it does look like bet small is fine some chunk of the time there too. You may say, should you ever jam turn? But the answer is no, no, no. When you jam turn and get called, it's going to be by an ace, by aces or a jack or maybe pocket queens. Oh my gosh, against tiny bet on the river, this is like the worst spot ever. Look, we have a lot of ace X. We have some jack X in our range in general. I'm not actually sure what we're supposed to do here. I'm gonna say call just because of pot odds, but I could be convinced this is a fold in the real world against most people. So it does look like it's indifferent in GTO, but against people in the real world, this is probably going to be a fold because it's really, really hard to find bluffs. All right, raise it up with our pocket kings. And the big blind calls. We flop top set. Pretty good hand. 2 to a flush, 2 to a straight typically means bet on the bigger side. Now with our exact hand in this exact scenario, top set with backdoor flush draw, I think the right play might be to bet small, but look, in the real world, I'm probably just going to bet everything using a bigger size. And it does look like our hand chooses the small bet every single time. So let's go through and explore that one. We can click on session history here and pop this right out. Click the wrong button. We can study this in the library. It'll bring the spot right up for us. In this scenario, on the flop, we do actually get to have some small bets. So in this spot, I would have messed up and mostly bet big. And this is where you going through and training will help you improve your skills. I mess up sometimes, you mess up sometimes, we all mess up sometimes. I naturally thought this would be a spot to bet big the majority of the time, which is why I clicked the big button. Now, like I said, our hand, pocket kings, especially with the king of hearts, is a hand that's really, 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 really going to want to bet using the small size in the situation. And it's good we got that concept right, but we got it incorrect that we should be betting big in that spot every time. But, that's why we study and we learn. Here, let's call in position with our pocket queens. Notice we just studied that spot a second ago, so we know don't rip it all in. We could re-raise small. Flop, queen, jack, 5 in position. I got to presume we're going to mostly want to call. But again, I would be wrong. We do shove the majority of the time because our hand's almost always good but vulnerable. That makes a lot of sense. On the turn with our stack depth, I think I'm going to be mostly shoving, but it looks like we are mixing in that scenario. It's fine and good. Notice, though, most of the time in these spots, we are trying to get money in the pot. All right, queen, 9-2. I got to presume we're going to want to check this some chunk of the time, although maybe we do just bet it frequently. If we are going to bet this hand, we want to use a small size. I'm going to say small bet, but I could be convinced check is better. So this is just the spot we're going to want to bet the majority of the time. It is sometimes tricky to know when to bet the majority of the time versus when not to, but typically you want to ask, do we have a lot of good hands, and is it kind of hard for the opponent to have something? If it's kind of hard for the opponent to have something, you usually bet pretty often. But when there's a lot of straight draws available, those are the times where you have to be a little bit more cautious. All right, queen, 3-3. Let's go for small bet pretty much every time. Notice here we actually do have some checks in our range, which is good to see. We'll play one more hand in position with our pocket queens, and we'll call it a day. King, 3-2. They bet small. We must call in position. You can't go around folding just because an ace or a king comes on the flop to a small bet. Turns of 5. They bet again. I'm going to call again. In the real world, maybe this is a spot you start overfolding against people who literally never bluff. And now, do we find a fold on the river? And I think in this spot, when we don't have a heart in our hand, we probably need to call. This might be a spot where in the real world I may overcall against aggressive players. But against most people in the real world who are just weak, tight, straightforward, just fold. I'm going to say call here, but I could be convinced it's a fold. Notice call every single time. Let's actually bring that one up in the GTO trainer as well. And I'm going to show you why you want to call against good, strong GTO players, but not against regular people in the real world. You essentially want to ask, is the opponent bluffing adequately on the river? Notice in the spot on the river, this is what their range is in GTO world. They have ace queen, which really wants to bluff. Ace jack, really wants to bluff. Ace 9, right, also really wants to bluff. And then a lot of sporadic busted draws. Okay? Notice the opponent can actually shove for value with jacks as well. So you have to ask, does my opponent do this with like random ace 9, ace jack, ace queen? Do they even 3-bet jack 10 suited pre-flop, jack 9 suited, 10-8 suited, right? Do they even do that pre-flop? A lot of people don't. Will my opponent value shove pocket jacks on the river? A lot of people wouldn't. So in the real world, if your opponent's going to be finding the logical shoves with ace, king, and aces and kings, right? And they're lacking some of the very obvious bluffs, that's the spot where in the real world you may want to find, call it decently big folds. So anyway, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you want to go and train yourself, improve your skills, I mean, I work on it every day, and even I still struggle. Definitely check out PeakGTO.com. Hope you enjoyed the video. Good luck in your games. Have fun. And I hope you get max value with all of your best hands.